Well, good morning again, and we're excited to get to Brazil. We just started deputation. I was talking with someone about what deputation is, and it's basically when a missionary is getting ready to go to the mission field. We have to raise support for one, and because I don't know if you know this, but living in another country costs money. Anyway, so we raise support and we go to different churches and present our ministry. And the word deputation comes from the word to deputize. As a sheriff deputizes his deputies as his representatives, the churches that we go to deputize us as their representatives in another country. And so that is why we call it deputation. So if you didn't know that, you learned something new today. And so it's a partnership, and not just when churches support us, they don't just give us money. They're partnering with us in the gospel. And we become partners together in Christ. And so we are your representatives in Brazil, and you get to represent us here. And so that's why we both have to do our part of it. Anyway, so we're excited. We started deputation about 3.5 months ago, a little more than that now. We're almost at 4 months, about a week away from 4 months. And so we've been doing full-time since October 1st. And we had 2 meetings before then, and then October 1st hit, and we just went straight into it. And October is often kind of missions conference season up north, and so we were crazy busy. We had 2 different weeks in the month of October that we had a different service every night that I was in, and it was in, depending on the week, 3 or 4 different churches in 3 different states. So it's been good though. God's been great, and He's been keeping us safe. And it's a lot of driving. If you can imagine, we visit. We're in a different church pretty much every service of the week, or every service day of the week. And one of the services we did was the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and then our next service was in Virginia because planning. And so that was a fun drive. But anyway, God's been good, and we're excited to get to Brazil. Our goal to get to Brazil is next summer. So June or July of next year is what we're shooting for, and that's just a little bit under 2 years, which is pretty short on the scale of deputation, but that's what we're praying about and praying that God will do for us. And a couple of things really quickly that we're going to be able to do in Brazil that are not in our video. One of the things that I'll be able to be involved with very quickly once we get in Brazil is writing Christian school curriculum. My parents are currently writing curriculum. They started in kindergarten. They just finished 3rd grade and are working feverishly on 4th grade. The reason we're doing this is because about 4 or 5 years ago, the Brazilian government made homeschooling a legal form of education. Before then, you could not homeschool if you were a Brazilian citizen. And so a lot of Christian parents are opting for homeschool because the public school system there is not good at all. And not only is it just a bad education altogether, but of course riddled with evolution and humanism and socialism in Brazil and different things of that nature. So they are opting to homeschool, but they don't have the materials, all of the materials needed in a really good conservative Christian environment. And so we're writing Christian school curriculum. And the plan of salvation is written into the lessons in every subject and every grade. So people that use our curriculum, the young people that will be taking it, will be hearing the gospel through their schooling frequently. And so we're praying that it will be used as a tool. I mentioned to Pastor yesterday that I took science in college, and I studied with Dr. Cowling there at Hals Anderson. And that was my major. I took secondary education in science with the intent to write the science curriculum for the homeschool curriculum from about junior high and up, and most of the math curriculum. So pray about that. That's something that we'll be able to do. Another thing is my dad just started a radio broadcast online, and we need more programs for it and more music to record it in Portuguese, because there's not a whole lot of vocal music in Portuguese. It's conservative in nature. And so we'll be recording a lot of music, and that's something that Lily will be helping with as well. And different radio programs, whether it be Bible studies or creation talks, different things of that nature. So those are a couple things that I just wanted to mention before we play the video. And the video pretty much encompasses what our ministry will look like in Brazil, and kind of our plans going forward, a little bit of our background. And so we can play that at this time. In the summer of 1974, my grandparents, Dan and Jerry Johnson, left the U.S. to fly to Brazil as missionaries. 6 weeks later, my father was born. He surrendered to be a missionary when he was 9 years old, and in the summer of 2005, my parents, Brian and Rebecca Johnson, flew to Brazil as well. We are David and Lily Johnson, and God has called us to return to Brazil as missionaries. God has blessed us with an amazing heritage, and has given me the wonderful opportunity of growing up on the mission field. Through my parents' example and teaching, I learned that serving God was the best life. Ever since I was young, I felt the desire to return to Brazil, and in 2020, God confirmed in my heart, through a night of much prayer and scripture, that He was calling me to Brazil.
I was raised in a second-generation Christian home. I was saved at the age of 13 and have always been surrendered to God's will for my life. I met David in college and we started talking. Before we even got serious, he asked me, "Are you willing to go to the field of Brazil?" I said, "Yes, of course."
Brazil is the 5th largest country in the world by land mass, and the 6th largest country in the world by population, with over 211 million people. Brazil is a hugely diverse nation, from booming cities of over 20 million people to the dense and sparsely populated Amazon rainforest. Brazil is home to an estimated 15 to 20% of all living species and up to 70% of the known plant and animal species. It is also a true melting pot for people groups from all over the world, including Europeans, Africans, and Asians. In fact, São Paulo, Brazil's largest city, hosts the largest population of Japanese outside of Japan itself. Brazil also has 200 indigenous people groups and around 150 localized languages. The largest religion in Brazil is Catholicism, with around 66% of the population claiming to be Catholic. The second largest religion is that of the Protestant movement, with Pentecostals being its largest component. The Pentecostal movement, often mixed with Spiritism, is the fastest growing religion in Brazil. Oftentimes, a church will move into a neighborhood and milk the people for as much money as they can. They sell soaps to wash away evil spirits, salts to cleanse from sin, and many other spiritual items. They will often bring in actors to have mock healings, just to bring in extra people. There is a great need for the true and healing gospel of Jesus Christ amongst a people so confused by the false teachings of the world.
In our first year, we will be located in São Paulo, which has over 21 million people in the metropolitan area. We will be helping in an already established church planted by David's parents, while I learn the language. In 2019, we were able to visit and help out in the church there. I played piano for the services, pretended like I could understand the sermons, and helped to pass out flyers. While passing out flyers, I would say, "Good morning," in Portuguese. They would usually respond with, "Thank you," and I would say, "You're welcome." Well, after I felt confident, someone responded to the flyer with, "Good morning, how are you?" And I said, "You're welcome," and kept walking. I came to fall in love with the place I will soon call home.
Portuguese is the official language of Brazil and is spoken by all but the indigenous tribes in the Amazon. After Lily learns the language and culture, we plan to start a church in one of the cities around São Paulo. One of the cities we are looking at is called Bragança Paulista. Bragança Paulista has a population of 170,000 people and has no churches of like faith. We will plant a church and train up nationals to follow in our footsteps. Just outside the city, we plan to purchase property to start a camp ministry, which will allow us to host Bible camps, pastors' conferences, creation camps, teen camps, and so much more. We desire to use this ministry as a tool in helping reach and teach the next generation of pastors and servants of Christ. Through our ministry, we plan to plant churches in many of the smaller surrounding cities, as they also have a great need for the gospel of Jesus Christ. Look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest. God is calling us into the ministry, and He may be calling you. Will you answer that call? Would you consider stepping out in faith and embarking on a journey with God? There is nothing greater than serving God, and we are so excited to see what God will do through us. Please consider partnering with us through your prayer and financial support. May the Lord bless you.
You'll get to meet and greet the Johnsons. They'll be here all day. Brother Johnson will be preaching tonight for the 6 p.m. service. And again, the offering that we receive this morning and tonight, any loose cash or anything designated for missions will go to the Johnsons today. And I know they covet your prayers above all else. They want you to pray for them, remember them. And it's very much what Brother Johnson said regarding deputation. We are partnering with missionaries. When we support a missionary, it's not just about sending them 1 or 2% of their needs for the month. It's really about partnering with them in prayer. It's about them representing us in Brazil and us representing them here in Kentucky. And so I'd encourage you, pray what the Lord would have you to do. I know He'd have us all to pray. I know He'd have us to do that. And Jesus said in Matthew, He said, "Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that He will send forth laborers into His harvest." So pray for that. And right now, Brother Johnson's going to come and answer any questions you may have for a few minutes. And then as soon as the question and answer time is done, the Johnsons are going to present special music.
All right. Any questions? Yes, sir. My favorite portions of the gospel to present in Portuguese. Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if I've ever thought about a favorite portion of it. That's... No, see, the Portuguese, we actually have a really good Portuguese translation. It's translated from the original text, and the same one that the KJV is translated from. And so it very much, when you put them side to side, they're very similar in their translations because of that. And they, several years ago, Brazil updated the language. They universalized Portuguese with Portugal and Brazil and the other Portuguese-speaking languages. And so a few of the grammatical rules changed, and because our translation is a current translation, they had to revise it with the new Portuguese rules. And so they went back to the original text and revised it from there. And so it's a very faithful text. And so presenting the gospel in Portuguese is, we present it very much how you would hear. We use the same scriptures, and it's fun to say. Porque Deus amou o mundo de tal maneira que deu seu Filho unigênito para que todo aquele que nele crê não pereça, mas tenha a vida eterna. So that's that's John 3:16. So, but yeah, that's probably one of my favorite verses to say in Portuguese, just because of that part. So anyway, so yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Money-wise, is the dollar?
Yeah. So the dollar right now is strong. The dollar has always been stronger than it's called the Brazilian real. It's spelled R-E-A-L, like real, but it's real. because it's Portuguese. So, but it's right now, I think the US dollar is about $1 is worth right about 5 or 6 Brazilian reais. And so the dollar is very strong right now. For most of the time I was growing up, it was about 2 to 3 2 to 3 Brazilian reais for every $1. But with the economies the way they are right now, the U.S. economy is very strong, and the rest of the world kind of stayed where it was, or shrunk during COVID especially. And so Brazil's economy hasn't grown very much in the last 10 years, and the U.S. economy has, so now it's a much stronger dollar. So it's about 1 to 6 right now, which is good for us as missionaries because we have more buying power, but it's not great for Brazil because they have less buying power. And so they can't get things as easily that would be imported internationally, and so they have a lot less power to purchase things in Brazil right now. So, yes, ma'am. So, I have 2 brothers. I'm right in the middle, so I have an older brother and a younger, Jeff and Lee. And the way that the laws worked with homeschooling, if you were a Brazilian, you could not homeschool. But if you were a foreigner, you had to follow the laws of your native country. I have dual citizenship. My dad was born there, so he's a Brazilian citizen. But because we have American citizenship as well, we could follow American laws. And so we were homeschooled in Brazil. My mom did all of our schooling, and so that's what we did. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
What's one of the biggest challenges of marriage?
Okay, so probably the biggest thing we have trouble with in Brazil is the Pentecostal movement, as was mentioned in the video. The problem with the Pentecostal movement is they preach prosperity gospel, which basically they will come into a neighborhood, and they tell you if you sell your house and give it to the church, God will give you 2 houses. And that is what they preach. If you sell your car, give the money to the church, God will give you 2 cars. And so people do this. They come into poor neighborhoods, and people do this, and then they leave. And we come in, and we're evangelical, and they're evangelical, so we're the same. And so when we come into a neighborhood that's already had a Pentecostal church come through, we have a very difficult time reaching the people there because they've been hurt by the church. And they feel like we're the same thing and we'll do the same thing. And so they don't want anything to do with us. And it's very difficult to work with those people. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of loving on them. And so we've run into that several times. So that's our biggest issue right now as far as religion goes. The only other thing right now, of course, is COVID. They're really afraid in Brazil, and they won't come to the door. It's getting better now, but for several months, my parents really couldn't go door to door because no one would answer, and they were just afraid to come talk to you, and so it wasn't productive to go door to door, and they had to do other forms of ministry and reaching people, and so that's been a difficult thing right now, but that's getting a lot better, and so the biggest thing would be Pentecostals. So, any other questions? Yes, Beck, you go ahead, sir. Not too much. Our government is set up very much like the American government. It was modeled after America's government. We used to have kings, and there was a military coup, and they set up a presidency and just modeled the government after the U.S. So our government system is very strong, but the only problem is that we're very socialist, and we elect a lot of socialist leaders. And our last two presidents, not counting our current president, the two presidents ago went to jail. Our last president was impeached for corruption charges. Our current president is conservative, and he's been really good for Brazil and for ministry. We don't have too many issues with the government as far as ministering goes. That the only place you run into those issues a lot is up in the Amazon, because they try and protect the native culture there, and so you can't bring a Bible in and you can't preach to them, and because that'll change their culture. And so that's the biggest area we have trouble with the government. But as far as in cities, not much at all. Only, of course, during COVID, all bets are off during COVID. But so they did do lockdowns, and we weren't allowed to host church, and they were doing huge fines if you did, and so that was one thing we had to deal with. But in normal day-to-day life, we don't have too many problems with them. You had a question? Okay, so most of those languages are native tribes in the Amazon. The majority of Brazil speaks Portuguese and only Portuguese. There are a few places, a few cities, especially farther south than us, that speak some German, because they had a lot of German immigration after the World Wars. And most of the tribes in the Amazon have their own dialects, and so they have their own languages. But as far as where we'll be ministering, everyone learns Portuguese, and so Portuguese is our main ministering language, and you can reach pretty much 99% of Brazil through Portuguese. So Brazil, not great. There's a lot of teen pregnancies, huge number of teen pregnancies, to the point that the Brazilian government has said, look, abstain. Okay. They try and tell people to abstain because it's just out of control. And so there's in Brazil, the word, if you go, so there's hotels and motels in Brazil. In Brazil, a motel is more common, but a motel is by the hour. So you never stay at a motel. And so that's just something that's everywhere. And it's a big problem in Brazil. And they really don't see they don't see it as a problem. That's just the way they live. And so sin is certainly prevalent. And beyond that, not only sin, but then spiritism and things of that nature are also prevalent in Brazil. So you have, we had to deal with a young lady in our church years ago that her father was a spiritist, and he would occasionally have her possessed. And so she would come to church, and my mom would witness to her, and one day she just wasn't being herself, and my mom asked her, hey, what's up? And she's like, I hate it when my dad does this. And so my mom had to pray over her for about an hour before the demon left, and then she was able to get saved after that. And so that's beyond sin. You have a huge presence of demons and spiritism in Brazil in that sense. And so they put sacrifices on, they'll put small food sacrifices on the side of the street, and you just avoid them because you don't know if it's a blessing or a curse. And so that's kind of a expounded problem with not only sin, but spirits and demonic activity that's very evident. And so, two more? All right. Another question? Yes, ma'am. So it was a patriarchy. Now the royal family is no more there. We had a king, but as far as like in the family itself, it's more of a matriarchy because the mom is very much the powerhouse of the home. And in favelas, which are the slums, there's kind of one of the older ladies in the slum is kind of like almost the slum lord in a way. It's kind of weird, but if she says something, it happens, and not in the sense of like gangs, but in the sense of just, hey, you don't mess with this person because she said not to mess with them. So it is very much inside the home. It's very it's much more of a matriarchy. So. One more question. Yes. So, not right now. We'll be working with my parents for a while, and we are still looking at exactly where to start our church. Bragança Paulista is one of the cities we're looking at, but there are several other options that we have, and we're going to really look more in detail to that once we get there, because with our long-term goal of starting a camp ministry, we need to consider, one of the things we're considering is where a camp will be most useful and where we can actually put one, because if you're in the middle of the city, there's no property, and so you can't build a camp. So we're looking at several different cities, but right now we'd be starting it mostly on our own, with working in conjunction with my parents, and working with their ministries and whatnot. But as far as pastoring there and ministering there, right now it's just us. So, yeah. All right, thank you, Pastor.
Yes. If you all would come, and the Johnsons are going to bring some special music, and I hope you'll get to know them, to meet them. We got to spend some time with them yesterday, and really excited for them about the work God has for them to do in Brazil. And as soon as the Johnsons are done with special music, we will receive the offering. And so ushers, if you'd be ready, and also if you would, church family, please be ready to give. Again, any loose cash will go to the Johnsons, and any designated funds will also go to the Johnsons today.
Looking back, I can see your fingerprints upon my life, always seeking my best. There were times when your way would make no sense, but as you said, you have never left. You are always good, you are only good, you are always good to me. Though my eyes can't see, help my heart believe, you are always only good. Looking in, I can see my frailty, my sin is great, and my strength is so small. Still you stay, and your mercy shelters me. You hold my hand, and you hear my call. You are always good, you are only good, you are always good to me. Though my eyes can't see, help my heart believe, you are always only good. Looking up, I can see your sympathy. I doubt myself, but I'm sure of your love. Lavish grace was poured out at Calvary, securing me for my home above.
Help my heart believe you are always only good. You are always only